Zara was stranded on a war-torn alien planet. The skies were gray with the remnants of a decimated civilization, and the air carried the weight of despair. The planet was no longer a place of life, but of decay. She, a once proud member of her species, now stood alone in the ruins, seeking refuge and survival. But as the days passed, it became clear that the planet's inhabitants had all but given up hope. Zara, however, was not ready to surrender. In the last remnants of a deserted city, Zara stood in front of a dilapidated building, its doors long since destroyed. The windows were shattered, and the inside was a mess of scattered debris. She looked around, realizing she had no real plan anymore, only the desperate hope that someone would take pity on her. "Hello?" Zara called out, her voice echoing against the broken walls. "Anyone?" No one answered. Her stomach growled, the sound of her hunger barely audible over the howling wind outside. Zara's mind raced for a solution. The resources on this planet were sparse, and there wasn't much left to offer. But she had one thing: herself. Taking a deep breath, Zara straightened her posture, trying to look as dignified as possible, even though her situation was anything but dignified. She cleared her throat and spoke again, this time with more purpose. "I offer my body for shelter," she called out into the empty air. "I have no place, no food, no warmth. Please take me in." Her words hung in the air, hanging between desperation and a flicker of hope. But the silence was deafening. No one came to her aid. Zara stared at the empty horizon, unsure whether to feel insulted or just utterly defeated. Her offer had been clear enough. She had meant it both literally and figuratively, offering not just her physical form but her presence, her connection, and, in a way, her survival. Yet the silence continued. Zara sighed, lowering her gaze. She wasn't sure why she expected anything different. The inhabitants of this planet had long since lost their humanity, their willingness to care for each other. She had hoped for someone to show kindness, but it seemed the war had stripped away all such notions. "Maybe I wasn't clear enough," she muttered under her breath, eyes scanning the horizon once more. "All right then, I'll try again." She wandered through the city for hours, repeating her offer to anyone she could find. But each time, the result was the same: blank stares, awkward silence, and sometimes averted glances. One alien, a short, scaly creature, even started to walk faster when Zara tried to approach. Zara's pride was slowly eroding, but her determination remained. As she continued her trek, Zara passed by an alien market. The goods were pathetic, scattered bits of scrap and remnants of what had once been valuable commodities. There were no lively barters here, just a lingering sense of defeat that hung in the air. Zara took a deep breath and stood at the edge of the market, watching the remaining traders. She saw a few potential candidates, older males with graying skin, frail and weak, who might offer her what she needed: shelter. She approached one cautiously, trying to look confident. "I offer my body for shelter," she said again, this time softer, with a bit more humility. The alien trader didn't even look up from his goods, instead shuffling some debris around with a disinterested grunt. "You offer what? Your body?" The alien scoffed, his voice rough and gravelly. "I'm busy. Find someone else." Zara blinked, feeling the sting of rejection once more. She moved on quickly, but the feeling of isolation only deepened with each attempt. Her physical and emotional exhaustion was starting to catch up with her. Eventually, she found a quiet corner near a broken-down building where no one could see her. There she slumped to the ground, burying her face in her hands. "Why is it so hard to find shelter?" she whispered to herself, her voice breaking. "Why doesn't anyone care?" It was then, in the deepest part of her despair, that she heard something. A voice. "Hello? You lost or just looking for something?" Zara looked up, startled. There, standing in front of her, was a human. Not an alien, not one of her kind, but a human. He was tall, with messy brown hair, a rugged face, and clothes that looked like they had seen better days. But it wasn't the appearance that caught Zara's attention, it was the way he spoke, with a tone of curiosity that felt different from the indifference she had experienced all day. "Who are you?" Zara asked, her voice hesitant yet hopeful. "What do you want?" "I'm Tom," the human said, smiling faintly as he crouched down in front of her. "And I'm just wondering what an alien like you is doing out here. You seem desperate." He paused, glancing at her more closely. "Are you offering what I think you're offering?" Zara's heart raced. Was this the moment? Had she finally found someone who understood? "Yes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I offer my body for shelter. I have nothing left. Please, I beg of you, help me." Tom raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her words, but he didn't recoil like the others. Instead, he crossed his arms and tilted his head. "I don't know about all that, but what's in it for me?" Zara blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, I'm no expert in alien culture, but I'm guessing you're not offering just for the pleasure of it, right?" Tom grinned, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "But I've got to admit, that's a pretty interesting approach. Not exactly what I was expecting on this planet, but I guess we all have our needs." Zara felt a surge of frustration rising in her chest. Was he mocking her? But before she could react, Tom held up his hand, signaling her to calm down. All right, I get it," Tom said, his grin fading. "You need shelter. I can help with that. But you're going to have to be a little more creative with your offer. I'm not taking you in just because you're desperate. I've got a lot of my own problems, too." Zara stared at him, speechless. Was this his way of rejecting her? Or was he being serious? She couldn't tell. Tom chuckled softly, sensing her confusion. "You know, I'm kind of an expert at surviving in weird situations. And I think I can help you get what you need. Just trust me." Zara wasn't sure what to think. She had offered everything she had, and yet here was this human, making light of her situation. But there was something about his demeanor, something in his eyes, that made her pause. Perhaps he was offering something she had long since stopped believing was possible, a real connection. "Well, if you're serious about helping," Zara said, trying to find the right words, "I guess we could start with shelter. I'll take whatever you have." Tom smiled and stood up, offering his hand. "Come on. Let's figure this out together." And in that moment, for the first time since she had arrived on this desolate planet, Zara felt a flicker of hope. Tom stood there, a grin tugging at the corners of his lips, as he looked down at Zara. She didn't seem to know whether to be relieved or confused. He had agreed to help, but the way he'd said it made her uncertain. It wasn't the soft, empathetic offer she had expected. No, it was the kind of proposal that came with a side of humor, sarcasm, and a feeling of uncertainty. "You serious?" Zara asked, still not sure if he was pulling her leg. "About helping you?" Tom raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. "I guess. But you're going to have to do a little more than just ask. Can't make it too easy, you know?" Zara's gaze narrowed. She was tired, hungry, and frustrated. She'd offered her body to practically every alien on this forsaken planet, and none of them had cared. She was tired of joking around, but Tom didn't seem like the kind of guy who would just take her plea seriously without his own spin on things. "Look, I'm not asking for a life commitment here," Zara said, her voice a little sharper. "Just shelter. That's all. I've got nothing else left." Tom's smile faltered for a brief moment. The reality of her situation was starting to hit him. Zara wasn't just some alien trying to get by. She was stranded, isolated, in a world that had chewed up and spit out everything she had once known. Still, he couldn't help but feel that there was something a little ridiculous about the whole thing. "No, you're not asking for a life commitment, but that's the thing, right?" Tom said, his voice taking on a mock-serious tone. "You've got nothing, but I've got to wonder, what's in this for me?" Zara's frustration boiled over. "I've got nothing! You think I'm offering you something more than just a chance to not freeze to death tonight?" Tom chuckled, clearly amused by her exasperation. All right. I get it. You need help. But you're going to have to show me what makes you worth my time, okay?" Zara didn't know whether to punch him or just walk away. Here she was, offering her survival in exchange for something so simple, shelter, and he wanted her to prove she was worth the effort? I've got nothing to prove, she shot back, her voice steady but laced with sarcasm. Either you help or you don't. I'm not here to impress you. Tom seemed to consider this for a moment. I suppose we're both in the same boat then. I could use a bit of shelter myself. Maybe not your body, but I'm not exactly turning down company. Zara clenched her fists, anger flashing in her eyes. Fine. Then take me in, or don't. I really don't care at this point. Tom paused, sensing that this was the moment to take the edge off the tension. He leaned back slightly and scratched the back of his neck. Look, all right, how about we call it a temporary arrangement? We work together, figure things out, and keep it civil. Civil? Zara scoffed. You're joking, right? You're not serious about any of this. Well, maybe not in the way you expect, but yeah, civil. You're offering shelter, but I'm offering something too. I'm offering you company. Zara raised an eyebrow. Company? What kind of company are you offering? Because last time I checked, I didn't need more sarcasm in my life. Fair enough, Tom said, chuckling again. But listen. The truth is, I don't know how to solve your problem. I've got a roof, but it's not much. It's small, it's a mess, and it's definitely not the palace you're probably expecting. That's fine, Zara said, her voice softer now. I just need to survive tonight. If tomorrow comes and you still want me gone, fine. I'll leave. Tom took a long look at her. Something about her determination stood out. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes or the strength in her words. Either way, she wasn't going to give up easily, and that was something Tom could relate to. In a way, it was almost comforting to see that kind of fire in someone else, even if she was a stranger. All right, Tom said with a sigh. No promises, but let's get moving. You can come with me. I've got a little spot I've been using. Zara nodded, relieved but still guarded. She wasn't sure if this was a genuine offer or if he was just doing it out of pity. But either way, she wasn't about to argue with the only person who had shown even a semblance of interest in helping. They walked in silence, Tom leading the way, Zara following behind. The cold night air bit at Zara's skin, making her wish for warmth more than anything. Tom's presence was oddly comforting. Despite the sarcasm, there was something about him that felt different. Maybe it was his resilience, his ability to find humor even in the direst of situations. Or maybe it was just that he had something she hadn't had in days, a sense of hope. After a while, they reached a small, crumbling building on the edge of the city. It looked like a shack, barely standing, but it was better than nothing. Tom pushed the door open and motioned for Zara to step inside. Well, he said with a half-smile. Here it is. Welcome to my humble abode. Zara stepped inside and took a quick look around. The place was small, dusty, and smelled faintly of mildew. But at least it had walls, a roof, and a floor that wasn't covered in rubble. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. And in this broken world, that was enough. I'll get a fire going, Tom said, grabbing some dried wood from a corner. You just make yourself at home. I don't have much, but I'll share what I can. Zara didn't know what to say. Part of her still wanted to leave, to not get attached to anything or anyone, but another part of her was already feeling the relief of being safe, if only for the moment. She sat down on a small bench in the corner and watched as Tom worked. The fire crackled to life, casting a warm glow across the room. Tom looked up and met her gaze, his expression softened for the first time. I guess we're in this together now, huh? He said, his voice quieter. Zara nodded, but she wasn't sure what to make of it. They were in a strange, temporary alliance, two beings from entirely different worlds trying to survive in a world that didn't care about them. Yeah, Zara said, her voice distant. I guess we are. Tom sat across from Zara, the fire between them crackling with a soft intensity. The small shack was warmer now, the chill of the planet's night air replaced by the warmth of the fire. Yet, for Zara, it felt like the heat of the flames wasn't enough to melt the tension in her chest. She watched Tom, who was absent-mindedly poking the fire, his thoughts far away. He wasn't a savior, not by any means, but he had offered something she hadn't had in a long time, a place to rest. Maybe that's all she needed for now. What happens when the night's over? Zara finally asked, breaking the silence. What's next? Tom stopped poking the fire and glanced at her. Next? Well, I guess we figure it out. If you're still here by morning, that is. Zara frowned. Still here? You're just going to kick me out? He shrugged, not meeting her gaze. Look, it's not that. It's just… I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Zara's jaw tightened. The idea of being tossed out again didn't sit well with her. But the reality was, she couldn't force Tom to make a promise he didn't want to keep. He had already done more than the others, though. You've got a funny way of offering shelter, Zara muttered, her voice laced with sarcasm. I thought shelter meant a roof over my head, not a countdown to get out time. Tom gave a half-hearted laugh. Yeah, well, in my experience, nothing is ever that simple. Nothing's ever really permanent. That's how I've survived. Survived? Zara repeated, cocking her head to the side. How have you survived? By making jokes and making things temporary? You've been here for what, a few days? Maybe a week, maybe longer, Tom said, stretching his arms out. Who's counting? Zara didn't respond right away. She thought about his words. Nothing's permanent. How true that felt, especially now. But she also realized that there was something almost comforting in Tom's nonchalant attitude. He wasn't offering promises, he was offering what he could, with no pretense. She let out a long breath and sat back, her thoughts drifting. You know, I thought all humans were like this, Zara said. Always making jokes, never taking anything seriously. But now I'm starting to wonder if you're just too afraid to make a decision. Tom chuckled at that. Afraid? Nah, not really. I just prefer to keep things light. No point in making life harder than it already is. Zara rolled her eyes. Right. So you're just living in the moment, huh? That's your big survival strategy? It works for me, Tom replied, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. And I don't exactly see you doing any better. You're stuck here with me, aren't you? Zara couldn't help the small smirk that crept onto her face. He wasn't wrong. She had nowhere else to go. The reality was, she had very few options left, and maybe Tom's weird way of looking at things was as good as any other. But you know, Zara said after a moment, it's strange. I'm offering all of me, everything I have, and it's still not enough. I've got nothing left. And still, no one gives a damn. You know what that's like? Tom's expression softened. I can't say I do. But I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to make a joke, to hide the fear behind a smile. Doesn't make it go away, but it keeps you from freezing up. Zara blinked, surprised by his honesty. It wasn't what she expected, but maybe it was what she needed to hear. Maybe she was so caught up in surviving that she'd forgotten what it was like to connect, to let someone see the cracks. She let out a breath, her eyes dropping to the floor. Yeah. I guess that's true. Tom picked up a small log and tossed it onto the fire. Look, Zara, I don't know what the hell I'm doing either. But I'm here, aren't I? And so are you. We're making it work, even if it's just for tonight. Zara didn't say anything. She had no response. There wasn't much to say when faced with the raw truth. She had nowhere else to go, and Tom wasn't pretending to be her knight in shining armor. They both understood that. So, Tom began again, clearly shifting the tone. We've got shelter, warmth, and food. What now? Zara thought about it for a moment. The question seemed silly. What now? They weren't exactly going to build a future here, not on this dead planet. But in this moment she had warmth. And that had to count for something. I guess, Zara said slowly. We wait. We wait until tomorrow. Maybe something will change. Tom nodded, the grin returning to his face. Sure, we wait. But while we're waiting, we might as well make ourselves comfortable. Zara couldn't help but chuckle at that. She hadn't expected to find humor in their situation, but here it was, simple, light, and almost comforting. And how do you suggest we do that? She asked, her tone teasing. Tom's grin widened. Well, we could talk. Or, just enjoy the silence for a while. Whatever works. They both sat back and fell into a companionable silence, the crackling of the fire filling the space between them. For the first time since she'd arrived on this planet, Zara felt a sense of calm. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a solution to her problems. But in that moment, the warmth of the fire, Tom's offbeat humor, and the shared quiet made everything seem a little more bearable. The night wore on, and Zara couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope, a small flicker, but a flicker nonetheless. Maybe they weren't so different after all, Tom and her. Two lost souls stuck in a place they didn't belong, trying to make the best of what they had. When Zara finally lay down to rest, her eyes closed but her mind stayed alert. Tomorrow would come, and maybe it would bring more questions than answers. But for now, in the stillness of the night, she found something she hadn't expected: peace. And that, at least, was a start. The morning light filtered through the cracks in the shack, casting faint shadows across the room. Zara woke up slowly, the warmth of the fire still lingering in the air from the night before. She stretched, feeling the stiffness in her body, but there was something different about today. Maybe it was the comfort of having a roof, or maybe it was the fact that she had made it through another night. But somehow things felt less impossible. Tom was already awake, fiddling with something on the floor near the fire. He looked up when he heard Zara stir. "You're up early," he said with a casual smile. "I thought you might sleep in." Zara grunted in response, still unsure of how to handle the lightness of the situation. She wasn't used to people being this comfortable. It felt odd to be sharing this small, makeshift space with someone who didn't seem to care about the uncertainties surrounding them. But maybe that was the difference between survival and living. "I wasn't tired," Zara said, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "I was just thinking." "Yeah? What about?" Tom asked, still half focused on whatever he was doing. Zara hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I guess. I just wonder if anything is ever really going to get better." Tom finally stood up and turned toward her, the usual smirk replaced by something more thoughtful. "I'm sure you've got plenty of reasons to think things are never going to get better. This place isn't exactly what you'd call a vacation spot." "No kidding," Zara muttered, crossing her arms. "I guess it just feels like there's no point. Every day is the same. Everything's the same. No one cares. I keep offering everything I have, and it doesn't make any difference." Tom stared at her for a moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I get it," he said finally. "I really do. But that's kind of how it goes, right? You can keep offering, keep giving, but you don't always get what you think you deserve." Zara let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah. No kidding. If I'd known I'd be stuck with a guy who thinks everything's a joke, maybe I'd have stuck it out on my own." "Hey, I'm no comedian," Tom shot back, his usual grin creeping up. "I'm just here trying to survive, same as you." Zara didn't respond immediately. She sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the floor. It was hard to argue with him. There was no denying that both of them were just trying to get by in a world that had stopped caring about them long ago. "So what now?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. "You're still not going to tell me your grand plan, are you?" Tom shrugged, looking at her with a wry smile. "Grand plan? Nah, I don't have any grand plan. But I do have a way of getting through the day, one step at a time. I've got enough to keep me going for now, and I'm offering you the same thing. That's all." Zara stared at him for a moment, then let out a sigh. "I guess that's all any of us can hope for. One step at a time." "Exactly," Tom replied. "We take it one step at a time. No promises, no big expectations. But hey, at least we're not alone in this mess. Could be worse, right?" Zara nodded, though she wasn't sure she agreed entirely. Still, Tom's attitude was starting to rub off on her, in a strange way. Maybe the hopelessness wasn't as absolute as it seemed. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about fixing everything all at once, it was about finding small moments of relief. Maybe she had been too focused on what was missing, and not enough on what was still there. Well, Zara said, her voice softer now, I guess it's not all bad. I mean, we're not freezing, at least. That's something, right? Tom replied, still smiling. I'll take what I can get. They stood in a comfortable silence for a few moments before Zara decided to break it. So, about yesterday, when you said I was stuck with you. Was that an invitation to stay? Tom paused, his grin faltering slightly. I mean, it wasn't an invitation, exactly. But if you're going to stick around, we'll figure it out. You can stay if you want. No big deal. Zara looked at him skeptically, then nodded slowly. Fine. I'll stick around for a while. But just so we're clear, I'm not here for your jokes. And I'm not here to be your charity case. Tom chuckled, not taking offense. Wouldn't dream of it. It wasn't a commitment, but it was an agreement, and that was more than Zara had had in a long time. The space between them, filled with tension and uncertainty just hours before, now felt a little more solid. They were still two strangers, but something was shifting, a shift that, if nothing else, made the situation more bearable. After a while, Tom stood up and grabbed a few things, preparing to head out. I'm going to find something to eat, he said. You in? Zara was surprised. You're going out there? With what's left of everything? Tom grinned. Someone has to keep the tradition of scavenging alive, right? Right, Zara muttered. She wasn't sure how she felt about going out again, but the idea of staying inside all day, stuck in this place, made her restless. I'll come with you, she said, surprising herself. She didn't know what she expected to find out there, but she knew she couldn't keep waiting for something to change inside the shack. If she was going to survive, she had to keep moving. They stepped out into the harsh daylight together, the barren landscape stretching endlessly in every direction. The ruins of the city were desolate, the once vibrant buildings now nothing more than shells of their former selves. There was nothing to salvage, nothing to cling to, but they kept walking. Side by side, making their way through the wreckage, not with any grand plan, but with the simple goal of getting through the day. Tom didn't speak much as they walked, and Zara didn't push him to. She wasn't sure what to say herself. But there was something about this, something about the shared struggle, that made the world feel a little more manageable. Maybe it wasn't a solution, but at least it was a step. When they found what little food was left, it wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was simply there. Neither of them expected miracles, and neither of them had any grand plans. But in that moment, that small shared act of survival felt more real than anything else. As the day wore on, Zara couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, survival didn't have to be about grand gestures or promises. Maybe it was about small moments, simple exchanges, and the quiet understanding between two people who, against all odds, were still holding on. And that, in itself, was something worth fighting for.